Your child is in danger. There's something bound up in their heart that needs to be driven far away from them. And in this video, I'm going to tell you just how to do that. After pastoring a congregation for 3 decades and currently serving as a chaplain, I've had many conversations about family, particularly about the challenges of raising children and specifically about the discipline of children. A Bible verse that always comes to mind regarding this subject is found in Proverbs 22:15. It reads, "Folly is bound up in the heart of a child," that's foolishness, "but the rod of discipline drives it far from them." Now I can hear someone say, "You mean to tell me that you look to an ancient book like the Bible to help find guidance about raising children?" Well, yes, actually I do. I lean upon the Bible for a number of different things, but even if we just didn't even consider the Bible at all in this subject, the truth of this verse is obvious to anyone who has children. For example, have you ever sat your child down and taught them how to lie? Have you ever sat down and told your child, "Look, here's how you need to say no, no, no after I've told you yes, yes, yes over and over"? No, that just actually comes surprisingly way too easy for your child because foolishness is bound up in the heart of a child. Now let's take a brief look at this verse. First we see folly is bound up in the heart of a child. Notice it says folly, not sweetness, not purity, but folly. Actually, folly again is foolishness, which is the opposite of wisdom. It's rebellion. It's the despising of discipline and the disrespect for any authority. Now, you might be saying already, "Oh, so that's what's going on in my child." Well, yes, exactly. Now, next we see something additional about the verse. Folly is bound up in the heart of a child. The child is bent toward foolishness and rebellion. Much like a small sapling might be growing crooked, and it needs to be straightened or trained or disciplined to grow in its proper direction, which is straight. Now, if the tree could talk, you might hear it say something like, "I don't like this. I don't want to be stalked down." Well, just like you will hear your child sometimes, they don't want to be disciplined. It's not pleasant for them, but it is necessary. Next, the verse says, "Folly is bound up in the heart of a child," it means in the deepest part of their being. So you're not merely just aiming for just behavior modification. That's good, but the child will just learn how to behave when you're around. In your discipline, you're aiming for character development so that they will not only behave well around you, but they'll behave well when you're not around. Next, we see that the rod of discipline drives it far from them. Now, before we talk about the most controversial part, which is about the rod, let's notice the ultimate goal, which is to drive foolishness far from your child. If some visible danger was near your child, you would do all you could to drive it as far away from them as possible. So, how do you drive the foolish bent of rebellion, and lying, and laziness, and disrespect from your child's heart? The scripture says the rod of discipline will drive it far from them. Now, let me say at the very onset, no child should ever be abused, tortured, beaten, slapped in the face, or disciplined in a fit of anger. That is not discipline. That is abuse. Now, many secular parenting theories say that the rod is just a metaphor, that to spank a child is uncivilized and unloving. On the other hand, a case could be made that to avoid discipline, such as spanking, is unloving as well. The term rod can refer to a broad range of rod-like objects, like a stick, a branch, an offshoot, or some of you will remember a switch. A rod was used to smite an object, not to beat it. Therefore, it's hard to read the Bible and get the impression that children should never be spanked. Of course, you have to figure out how it works best in your home. Some kids only need just a stare to melt their heart. I did find it amusing to hear the story about Billy Graham. His 2-year-old son spit at Graham in a fit of anger. Graham said, I don't know where he learned such an ugly habit. But one thing I do know for certain, if that boy chews tobacco when he grows up, he'll swallow the juice, because after what I did to him, he'll never spit again. Now, I don't know what he did exactly, but I'm sure it wasn't abuse, but it got the point across. I want to tell you a story before I conclude. When my daughter was around the age of 6, there was an incident. We were at her grandmother's home. Now, just to be clear, that was my mother-in-law's home. And my daughter pitched an ugly fit and did the unthinkable. And I disciplined my daughter in her grandmother's home, my mother-in-law's home. Again, remember that's unthinkable to do something like that. But I snatched her up from the floor. I spanked her bottom. I sent her to the bedroom to lay down. Now, I want you to know I didn't enjoy any of this, but the tree needed to be straightened. After about 15 minutes, I went to the room my daughter was in, and I sat down on the side of the bed, and I explained why I did what I had done. I told her I loved her. I affirmed and told her that if she was ready to behave, she could get up now, and she did. And I expected her to really be cold toward me. I even expect her to climb up in her grandmother's lap and get all the pity and sympathy that she could get, but that's not at all what happened. I went and I sat down to watch TV, and my daughter climbed up in my lap and she held on to me. In fact, she was stuck to me for the rest of the evening. That discipline, it didn't drive her away from me. It seemed to drive her closer. You see, I saw danger for my daughter, and I set out to drive it far from her. And now, I want to stress I didn't enjoy it. Matter of fact, every time I had to discipline my daughter, I usually go in the other room and really felt bad or sometimes cried. This can be a very, very touchy, sensitive subject for many. Some have been disciplined in just uncaring, angry ways, and it's unfortunate that's happened. Some will say, I'm never going to spank my child, therefore. And down deep, I'm saying, can I do it for you? Because they are in danger of foolishness that needs to be driven far from them. Now, I'd love to hear from you about this subject. Again, I know it's controversial. Some are going to agree, some are not going to agree. But I'd love to hear what you think about this. Leave it down in the comments. Maybe some of your comments will help somebody else think through this situation. If you like this video and you found it helpful, certainly consider leaving me a like, share it with your friends, and certainly subscribe if you haven't already subscribed. I am Van Unfiltered.